Welcome to another special edition of Daily Airline News covering the search for MH370. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, and once again, delighted to say we are joined by Richard Godfrey, the UK aerospace engineer who has taken Whisper and used it to develop a tracking program for MH370 and thus a new location. Greetings, Richard.
Good morning or good afternoon.
Yeah, now we've got a lot to get through today, lots of things we want to talk to you about. And to start off, as usual, Richard's going to bring us up to date with exactly the location and what's happening with Armada 7806.
Armada 7806 is still working in the second survey area. The vessel is showing a restricted status, which means it's deploying equipment like AUVs and maybe an ROV. They're currently doing bathymetric survey work in preparation for a further underwater search for MH370, and they have not actually started the search for MH370. So we're showing you a screenshot of where Armada 7806 is currently located, and it's following a similar pattern to the first survey area before it then departed to Fremantle. The vessel is still showing a destination of Cape Town, but I would not be surprised if this changes to Fremantle at some point. There's a big difference between survey work and search work. And there's difference in the objective, different in the mission planning and the data collection and the data processing. In survey work, you want to build a high resolution map of the sea floor, which has been done before, but there are obviously gaps in that. And you need, as a precursor for searching, a seafloor map in high resolution, which doesn't have any gaps in it. And then in search work, you're going back to that area and looking for debris or wreckage, and for a specific target like MH370. So in survey work, you're being very broad and methodical, probably following a grid pattern. And in search work, you're then going back to the same area, but looking in detail for any debris or wreckage that you may find.
Now, Richard, you've mentioned on a few of these broadcasts, in fact, quite a few of them, a number of experts. Do you work together on this search?
Yeah, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. The ATSB acknowledged a large number of experts in their report on the search for MH370, which was published back in 2018. At that time, they acknowledged Duncan Steele, Mike Exner, Victor Unello, Don Thompson, someone called Richard Godfrey, Simon Hardy, Bobby Ullich, Robin Stevens, and Blaine Gibson. Blaine got a special mention for all of his work in finding items of floating debris around the Indian Ocean. So, yes, we do work together. I have met with Blaine Gibson, and I believe you have too, Jeffrey.
Yes,
And we're
indeed.
in a regular email contact. But I've also met with other experts. For example, met with David Manns, who's a famous wreck hunter and has discovered many historic wrecks in his career. Showing you a photo of a meeting with David Mearns, which was taken by Don Thompson, who was also at that meeting, and Victor Unello joined by a video conference call. Uh, More recently, Ocean Infinity, for example, invited Pete Foley, the ex ATSB project manager for the MH370 Search, and Simon Maskell, my co-author on the Whisper technology, to the meeting with Anthony Loke. So all the time there are meetings and discussions going on behind the scenes between various experts.
Now, we had one person who asked about what qualifies you to talk about MH370. Now, I know that you're an aerospace engineer, you work with NASA, the Space Shuttle, ESA, Space Lab, Boeing, and Airbus aircraft. Can you tell us a bit more about your background to enlighten the viewers?
Yes, I worked 5 years on the NASA shuttle program and on the European Space Agency Space Lab program. The Space Lab uh, carried a number of scientific experiments and flew with the shuttle on several occasions. Before that, I was working with the companies like Boeing and Airbus. I built autopilots, automatic landing systems for aircraft, and a variety of other avionic systems. So I know also have a private pilot's license and a glider license, so I know about how aircraft fly and should be navigated. And Yeah, that gives me a good background to be able to understand what might have happened with MH370. But let me turn it back on you, Jeffrey. I mean, you've won a lot of national and international awards for your work and have written 17 books on the aviation industry. Uh, Please tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I was for some time the Southeast Asian editor for a magazine called Aviation Week and Space Technology, McGraw-Hill in New York, and then I was the senior editor for a airline management magazine, Air Transport World, and then I also founded a company called AirlineRatings.com that safety rates airlines and whatnot. But yes, won 47 international and national awards for the works I've done, and as you say, written 17 books. I guess my forte is taking the complex world of aviation and translating it into something that people can understand. So yeah, it's been a fascinating journey. But thank you. Yeah, but
I
we've
think you were
also
also named Aerospace Journalist of the Year, weren't you?
yeah, I was. That was 2009 at the Royal Aeronautical Society Aerospace Journalist of the Year. And referring to MH370, I was also awarded a Decade of Excellence for my coverage of the MH370 disaster, which I have been covering since the very night it happened. And it's been a long journey, that one. So yeah. But we've had a lot of viewer comments and questions, Richard. I know you've had a look at a few of them, and I've been going through them. We had almost 260, I think, from this last episode. And one of the questions, at least one previous crash, Egypt Air 990, revealed a significant resistance in the Muslim world to the idea that a Muslim could ever commit suicide and murder like this. He goes on, this investigation was hampered by Egypt, and indeed it was, refusing to allow any criminal investigation of the flight crew and also refusing to accept the NTSB conclusion that the aircraft had been deliberately flown into the sea. It seems bizarre to most of us, but religious and cultural beliefs can indeed be a strong motivation for not wanting to accept the truth and reality. Very, very telling question.
Indeed, it is, and quite clearly, the investigation into MH370 cannot be hampered by any preconceived ideas of a religious or cultural nature. And that's why it's very important to continue an international effort. And Malaysia has involved and are duty bound to involve Boeing from America as the manufacturers of the aircraft, Rolls-Royce from the UK as the manufacturer of the engine. They've involved the NTSB in America, Bayer in France, who analyzed the flaperon, for example, where there is an ongoing criminal investigation currently. Involved the UK, then industry experts like Inmarsat and Thales and Lockheed Martin. So it's important, in my view, to make sure we have this international collaboration on the investigation and avoid any yeah, preconceived ideas out of religious or cultural beliefs.
Another question, which has come from several people, talks about the strong underwater currents. So we've got a whisper location, for instance, on where it crashed on the surface in a 30 kilometer radius or 30-mile radius. Um, how far do you think the debris, the heavy debris, the fuselage, for instance, could have moved underwater with the currents? That's an interesting question.
If we take the example of Air France 447, um, it it crashed in the Atlantic Ocean. It broke up upon crashing, and the heavier items sank to the bottom of the seabed, around 4,000 meters deep. The debris field, by the time it reached the seabed, the seafloor, it had spread over an area about 800 meters by 300 meters. There was the odd item of debris found further afield, uh, but it once you discover something like the landing gear or the engine core, larger pieces of the wing or fuselage, then you usually find a number of other items not too far away. And once these heavier items hit the sea floor, they can get partly buried in mud or silt or sand, and that sort of locks them in from the ocean currents moving them around. Obviously, lighter items, especially floating items like cushions or seat backs, will stay on the surface for quite some time and get carried by the currents and eddies and the winds quite some distance. We've seen that floating debris has traversed the entire Indian Ocean and been found on the shores of Africa, for example. But the problem with seat cushions and seat backs, and if there isn't air trapped in the object, the item of debris, then eventually they can soak up enough water and they will sink.
Mm.
Items that have air trapped inside, for example, a honeycomb section of a wing. So the flaperon, for example, had closed air spaces inside its construction and the body of the flaperon. So that floated and it traveled a long way to the island of Réunion.
Yeah,
So there
indeed.
are different kinds of debris and
Yes.
different effects from currents.
Now we mentioned, and we mentioned this a number of times, and this is a really great question. It's come from a number of people. We've talked about the fishing vessels in the current survey area, and we've also talked about the fact that they stay there, and then we have a resupply ship coming to supply them. And the comment the question comes, if that's the case, why didn't they see MH370 crash in this most southerly location? You want to talk to that one?
Yeah, obviously the crash location of MH370 is not tightly defined currently. There are indications from some experts it could be in a more southerly area. Captain Simon Hardy, for example, or Captain Byron Bailey, Captain Mike Keane tend to go down to about 40 degrees south. The IG are around 36, 35, 34 degrees south. In between, UWA is a little bit further north, around 30 to 32 degrees south. The Whisper area is 29 degrees south to 30 degrees south. So there's a huge span of different areas. The Chinese fishing vessels, and currently account about more than 100 of them, um, are all down in the southern part of the search area and the survey area. When you look back in 2014, there was still a number, but not quite as many as there are now. But again, in 2014, just as now in 2025, there were no Chinese fishing vessels in the northern parts of the MH370 search area.
That's interesting. So obviously the fishing's not that good up there.
Yeah, the fish like it at a certain temperature. They like it quite cold, and obviously the further south you go, the colder the water.
This question is more of a statement, but I think I'll read it because I love it. Good grief, gentlemen. Talking about a plot twist Netflix would be proud of. That's a heck of a change up. So glad to hear the work's continuing. Well done. So, yeah, that's not a question, it's a statement. But let's talk. This is another one which is interesting, and a lot of folks who are not in the industry don't understand this element. And this is, can you please help us understand about how so many waypoints exist without landmarks? Um, so, can we talk to that one, Richard?
Yeah, there are navigation charts for sailors, and there are aeronautical charts for pilots. The world is covered with waypoints which allow precise navigation. So you can use an inertial navigation system in an aircraft or a GPS system in an aircraft. Most boats these days will have a GPS system, and these systems have a list of all the waypoints. And for example, for a flight plan, you produce a list of waypoints which take you
Mm.
from your departure airport to your arrival airport. And it's similar for a sailor at sea. I've sailed across the Indian Ocean myself, and you set waypoints. Of course, there are no landmarks in the middle of the Indian Ocean or any ocean. When you get closer to a coast, you can pick up a skyscraper or a church with a spire or a tower on the coastline, and that can help your navigation. But with GPS, it's these days very easy. Of course, if the GPS fails, then you still have to be able to navigate, and then there are old methods and well-tried methods using the stars and the sun and a sextant, and you can work out what your position is, and That sort of technology has been around since the Portuguese invented it in the 16th century.
Indeed. And interesting enough, when the first commercial jets came out, the 707s, they had a navigator on board and they had a little window in the roof for taking sightings.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of trivia for you. But those windows in the roof have long gone. Another one's come through. While we wait for the search to resume, can Richard please talk us through the reasoning behind the theories of the other search areas, other than obviously Whisper?
Yeah. So one major factor is how much fuel was on board MH370, and we know that quite precisely. And we know from Boeing exactly how far and how long a Boeing 777 can stay in the air. So that's one item which has guided many analysts. The next is the Inmarsat satellite data. The IG did a lot of work deciphering the BTO and the BFO data, which tells you how far an aircraft is from the satellite and the relative velocity between the aircraft and the satellite. So it doesn't give you a precise location, but it'll allow you to draw an arc or several arcs on a map about every hour. There's been a significant number of oceanographic drift analyses performed uh, by different oceanographers. They've taken where floating debris has been found and tried to work out where the crash location could have been, i.e., where that debris started and floated. And they have complicated models of the Indian Ocean with the currents and the winds and the eddies. Uh, so it's quite a difficult process and takes a lot of computing power. But there have been several predictions which have guided experts like David Griffin or like Professor Charita Patiarachi from UWA. But there's about 10 different drift analyses that have been done. So that guides another group of individuals, and then you put all of these together, and you come to what you believe actually happened with MH370. And that's why you get these different theories and different reasonings going on behind alternative search areas.
Another question, which really we've already answered, but let's do it again. With Richard being an expert on Whisper technology, is there any reason why Ocean Infinity have not employed him and his team to assist with the search of MH370? And he does say, apologies if this has been queried before, but let's go over that again.
Yeah, well, I'm retired, so I'm not interested in employment, but thank you for the thought. However, my co-author, Professor Simon Maskell, is engaged with Ocean Infinity as a scientific advisor to the search for MH370, and he was present at the presentation Ocean Infinity made to the Malaysian government back in May last year, which has kicked off this whole discussion about an agreement and the return of Ocean Infinity to the MH370 survey and search area. So, and as we mentioned earlier, talking about other experts, a large number of experts at Ocean Infinity have consulted, and they've all put their various theories together. And if you actually add the Whisper theory to the Boeing, the Inmarsat, the oceanographic drift, and they all point to the one and the same locations, then I think you made a pretty good case.
It should be also stated, and in talking about being employed, there's virtually no one involved in this project that's actually being paid, including Ocean Infinity, because they've already done the 2018 search and didn't find it. So the cost of that they bore themselves. People like Blaine Gibson, he doesn't get paid for what he does. He just does it because he wants to do it. And same with all of us, really. We do it because we want to do it, and it's an exciting project. The end result is we'll find MH370 and bring closure to those relatives left behind. One
Yeah,
final question. Sorry.
the only point I'd add to that is the only people I know who've been paid and made quite a lot of money are people like Netflix,
Yes.
who make a documentary.
Yes.
So the rest of us are doing this for free.
Yeah. One final question. Does the vessel have the ability to retrieve the black boxes on this visit? And that comes from Phil, Wendy, and Steve in the UK. So we'll give them a cheerio for the question.
Yes, it does have the ability to retrieve a black box. The actually not black, but never mind about the color. They have a nice day glow paint to try and make it easier to find them. But after 11 years, they could be buried in mud and silt and sand. But it's still important to look for them. We know exactly the location on the aircraft. So if we find the wreckage and a field of debris, then the first thing that is done is to map that out and to work out where the cockpit and the tail and the wings are, and then from that we can work out the approximate area of where the flight data recorder or the cockpit voice recorder could be found. And then you just go hunt until you do recover those black boxes or so-called black boxes.
Hmm.
Important to recover that data, and it
Yep.
will still be readable after all these years. So that'll give us a lot of clues.
Now, I know I said that was the last question, but there is one more that I think is really important. And I know you covered it on briefly at the start. Could the bathymetric scanning of the ocean floor find the plane while they're doing that survey? Could they stumble across it? Could they recognize it?
Yep. If they stumble across a large field of debris or large items of wreckage, they will be able to recognize it. The
Hmm.
the survey work has a different objective, but it uses the same equipment. The Hugin 6000 AUV uh, will be employed. Of course, the Hugin has a number of different sensors, and depending on they will use an array of these sensors in both survey work and in search work.
Hmm.
But if they find the wreckage, then they will stop the survey work and start mapping out the debris field and focus on a particular location.
Good stuff. Well, I think that's enough of the questions. I mean, there's many more, and they're fabulous, and we'll try and get to some more of them tomorrow, Richard. And once again, thank you for your time and your research. It's just a fascinating subject, and obviously, the thousands of folks that are tuning in every day are loving it. There's some great comments, and we do appreciate them very much. We appreciate your support. So please subscribe, please like us, and please leave some more comments. We love them. And thank you again, Richard.
You're welcome.